I'm coming back to YouTube. Hey, hope you guys are doing well. There's a lot to talk about. I'm coming back to YouTube, but first and foremost, I think you guys deserve an explanation about a lot of things, because as things sit right now, I would assume that the majority of people think that I made a bag of money and I just ran for the hills, which is a fair thing to think. You know, if you were to look back on the way that things had ended, I would assume people thought I was paid to shut up about AMC, and there was a good amount of money, enough for me to just run for it and skedaddle. But that's really not what happened. And I want to explain the full scope of things. So I'm going to talk about a lot of things today. I'm going to talk about why I left YouTube. I'm going to talk about the story of what happened that led me to leave YouTube. I'm going to talk about the story of the years to come after YouTube. I'm going to talk about my plans coming back to YouTube, and one other thing. We'll get into that as things progress. So in order to really explain why I left YouTube and what had happened, I first have to go back in time a little bit so you guys can understand my psychology and my faults as a person. First and foremost, before I got onto YouTube, I had financial problems. A lot of them were self-induced, to be quite frank with you. When my dad passed away, I was about 18 years old, and then my stepdad. And when he passed, the night that it happened, I was playing blackjack at the casino. And I got a call at like 3 or 4 in the morning from my little sister saying, hey, Dad's dead. And that sucked. And I'm not saying that to make it feel bad for me. Everybody dies. It is what it is. People lose parents, whatever. I'm saying that because I think psychologically that did something to me. It created gambling as a vice to escape my emotions and pain and anxieties and things that I should deal with but don't want to deal with. You know, it was just a negative vice for me, you know. So fast forward. Some years passed, and I ended up getting onto YouTube for stocks and investing. Before I got into stocks and investing, I was a runner. I ran for about 13 years. I couldn't do it anymore. I've got a heart problem. I could talk about that a lot, but that's not important. I got into stocks in about October of 2020, and this was back when things were really hot. I mean, back then you could throw a dart at 100 stocks, small and mid-cap companies, and whatever you hit, if you put $100 into it, you're probably going to 2, 3, 4, 5x your money in some given period of time. So I made a lot of money right when I started. And I thought, damn, if I'm this good at stocks, I should make videos documenting it so maybe people can watch my stuff and make money too. So I did. I started a YouTube channel in December of 2020. And right when I started, I was pretty successful. Things went really well. I made a good chunk of money and eventually ran into AMC at like $2 or $3. And when I found out at $2 or $3, I made a video saying I think it's going to go up, and it did. And my video went viral. And overnight, just like that, I had 100,000 subscribers, and my videos were getting a shit ton of views and making me a shit ton of money. And this was probably the worst thing that could have possibly happened for me at the time, just based on my past experiences. Now, I'd mentioned that I was not good with money and that I gambled a lot. But I want you to understand that I got myself into a decent amount of debt before I got on YouTube. Some of it, you know, unfortunate circumstance. I've got an autoimmune condition that causes inflammatory problems for me. And for me, I've experienced it a lot in my eyes. So, you know, I accumulated some debt and some bills from, the steroid drops that I have to take for my eyes. But the majority of it was just I was making, $3,500, $4,000 a month. If I was full-time at Buffalo Wild Wings, which most of the time I wasn't. But, if I was working part-time, just weekends, I wanted $1,000 or $2,000 a month, and I was taking that money and being wildly irresponsible with it. 80-90% of it, I was just gambling, and the rest I would leave for myself to pay bills and to survive. So I accrued a lot of debt, credit card debt, whatever. And then I got on YouTube, and I thought that I had resolved those things. And the reason I thought I had is because I saw such immediate success, and I didn't really experience failure or loss. So I just thought I was a god, to be honest, which sounds stupid as shit, now. And listening to this, you're going to be like, yeah, of course, you dummy. Why would you think you're going to win every single time you trade? But at the time, I really was. I really wasn't experiencing loss whatsoever. But I blew up overnight. And then from December of 2020 to June of 2021, my channel grew like crazy. And I made about $1.5 million. And this is an absurd amount of money. It really is like hitting the lottery. I basically hit a scratch ticket that paid me $1.5 million. And that's amazing. That's an insane thing that doesn't happen to a lot of people. That's a 1 in a million type thing. You know, I was in the right place at the right time. I put my money where my mouth was, and things ended up working out. But the problem is what followed afterwards. And this is why I ended up leaving YouTube is I made $1 million on AMC call options in June of 2021. I remember June 2nd, I took a screenshot of my brokerage account, over $1 million. And what stinks, man, is I took some of that money and I set it aside, but I took a very large chunk of that money and I bought AMC stock in the high 50s, low 60s, whatever the price was. I can't remember exactly. And I very quickly watched that money evaporate. And let me tell you, when you come from a place where you don't have a lot, I grew up in small town Bowles, Minnesota, population of 210 people. I've never seen more than maybe at most, and I'm probably being very liberal here, $10,000 in my bank account at one given time. To go from that to, being a millionaire in a 6-month period of time is insane, And when that happened and I put all that money into the stock, I watched it bleed very quickly. I was losing $50,000, $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 as the stock continued to drop and drop and drop and drop and drop. And psychologically, that flipped a switch in my brain. And the switch that it flipped was, quite frankly, like a gambling itch. And I began trading on tilt. And the reason why I left YouTube is because I was being a degenerate and I was being a loser and losing all my money. And I want to explain to you how I lost all my money so you can really understand things. In the whole time that I was on YouTube, I made over $2 million. And I have none of that money anymore. To be frank with you, I work as a server as things are. And I'll get into that more later. But I made over $2 million. And I lost all of that money just trading on tilt, playing blackjack at casinos. And, a small percentage of it was like travel and drinking and smoking nicotine. I know at the time I was going through like a 4-pack of the 5% menthol Views pods every 2 days. Some of it went on to weed. Maybe $100,000 in total I gave to things I believed in. Like I know I tipped waitresses like $10,000 for a video once, and I donated to some organizations I believed in. And when followers would reach out, I'd give them some money, and friends and family I've given some money to. But the overwhelming majority of money that I lost because I was trading on tilt and I was reacting emotionally to the markets. And that stinks, man. That's a really shitty thing. And that happened from June of 2021 until I walked away September of 2022. And that was a really unideal year and a quarter. And I didn't really share that with people for good reason. I probably, I could have back in the time, but it's a very embarrassing and humbling thing to happen to you. And I, not even the people closest to me in my life knew that was happening because I was so embarrassed of the way that I was acting and conducting myself and handling my money. Because how can you explain to your friends and family and your followers or anybody that you made $2 million and now you're broke, that you're living paycheck to paycheck? When I was on YouTube, I was making on average like $30,000 to $40,000 a month, and I was living paycheck to paycheck because 90% of whatever I made went into the stock market and the rest was used to pay bills and to survive, which is absolutely 100,000% the wrong way to handle your money. And I knew it at the time, and I did it anyways, which stinks, man, because I don't think of myself as a low IQ individual. I certainly have a good head on my shoulders, and I knew the things that I was supposed to do, but I couldn't bring myself to do them, if that makes sense. And that's a discipline thing. That's an impulsivity thing. That's an emotionality thing, And to make things worse, I didn't just lose my money, I handle my finances like an absolute dipshit. I didn't save money for taxes. So now I owe the IRS and the North Carolina Department of Revenue just shy of $1 million. I didn't pay off my mortgage, so I still have, nearly $200,000 left on the mortgage. It's like $170K or 165, something like that. I didn't pay off my Tesla. I don't drive that anymore, obviously. I forewent that to the bank or whatever the correct word is for that. And I also borrowed money from friends and family in the tune of about $400,000. To make it clear, I'm making payments to those people and I'm making it right. I'm on some really long-term payment plans with everybody that I borrowed from so they get their money back. But I was just a fucking loser, and I was being a degenerate, and I was making really bad decisions financially, and I had to get myself out of my own way. There came a moment when I realized before I walked away from YouTube that I had to put the shovel down. Like, I was holding a very big shovel, and all I was doing was digging myself deeper and deeper and deeper into the ground. It felt like I was digging my own grave, you know? And in order to get out of that hole, I first had to put the shovel down so I could sit there and look up at how far I've dug myself, you know? And that's what I did. The other piece of why I ended up walking away was a psychological thing. It had nothing to do with money. It had to do how I thought of and viewed myself. Rightfully so, may I say. I thought of myself very lowly. When I would look in the mirror every single day, I would say, you are a piece of shit. You had it all, and you blew it, and your life is fucked forever. And I didn't think of myself very highly. What I cared about more at the time was being thought of highly by the people in my life. Being liked. I'm a people pleaser at heart, and if you watch my stuff for any period of time, you know that. You know that opinions of others would cut me deeply, that I wear my heart on my sleeve, that I'm a very emotional person. And still today I'm an emotional person, but I certainly carry myself and conduct myself differently. But what I craved more than anything in life at the time, and I would never admit it back then to myself, but I can now, was just to be liked by others, which is, to me, the wrong way to live life. That's a very unsatisfying life. And you can't control that a whole lot. You know, you can't control what other people think of you. All you can control is what you think of yourself and the way that you carry yourself and move and walk and talk and act and breathe, you know? But I didn't. At the time, I just wanted people to like me. I wanted to be popular. I wanted to feel like I was making a difference in the lives of others. And I still want to make a difference in the lives of others today. But you can't do that if you can't help yourself, you know? And I was not helping myself at all. I was just hurting myself. I put myself into a shit-ass situation. And I'm still in it today. I pay the North Carolina Department of Revenue like $1,200 or $1,300 a month. The IRS garnishes wages. My mortgage is like $1,300 a month. My Honda Civic that I drive is like $900 a month on a 3-year loan with just a retarded shit interest rate. It's like 15 or 16%. I pay a couple grand a month to friends and family that I owe. I've got food. I've got my utilities. I mean, you get the picture. You know, I put myself into a bad spot. And I don't say this to make you feel bad for me, because it is 100% my own fault. We are the man of our own ship. And I drove my ship straight into an iceberg, and it sank, and I was about to drown. And the only way to keep yourself from drowning is to swim to shore. So I slowly did. But before I get into, you know, what happened after I left YouTube and, you know, the story of all that, I first want to conclude losing my money and why I walked away. I lost all of my money that I made from YouTube, and I walked away because I had to get out of my own way. And I understand that I left a lot of you high and dry. And the criticism that I receive is deserved for that. And I understand. I don't expect people to support me. I don't expect you to like me. I don't expect anything, you know? All that I care about these days is being able to look in the mirror and say that I am happy with the way that I'm moving, walking, talking, acting, despite the result. I want to be proud of the process. And I think to be proud of the process, if I'm going to come back to YouTube, you guys have to understand the truth about who I am and that part of my life, that segment of my life. And that segment of my life, I was a fucking loser. I had all the knowledge, all the money, all the ability to put myself and others into a better place, and I didn't do it. And it's my own fault. And I want to take accountability for that. So with that being said, now that that's out of the way, when I walked away from YouTube, the first year afterwards, I spent the majority of my time just looking out the window. I wanted to die. I was definitely suicidal. Things sucked. All I could think about was you had it all and you blew it, and all these people hate you, and there's absolutely no way you can get out of this situation. You don't have any reason to be alive anymore. It was a very tough year. That was the hardest year of my life by a very, very long margin. And it was the hardest year of my life because it was the first time that I had ever really been humbled. I know this probably sounds crazy, but I really did think of myself as invincible from like birth until 2021 when that happened to me. I just never really been humbled before. I don't say this to be cocky. I say it because it's just the truth of how my life has rolled out so far. I never really had a super major failure at any point in my life that set me back a very long ways. I worked hard to get the things that I had. You know, I was a good runner. I did well in school. I worked hard at my jobs. I worked hard in the music that I would make. But I only ever really saw half of the equation of like, if I work hard, I get what I want. And YouTube like certainly gratified that for me. Like when I started YouTube, I made 3, 4, 5, 6 videos a day, and within a month I had 100,000 subscribers. So I was like, oh, if I work hard, I get what I want. But that's not always how it goes. You know, sometimes you can work hard and things don't go your way. And for me, things didn't go my way in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and that certainly added to it. You know, I felt very embarrassed of not only failing as I had, but failing in front of the world. That's a tough experience, you know. And I faced that for about a year, but there eventually came a point where I thought I just need to do something to make myself feel better. So I picked up the gym. And I didn't go a lot. I went maybe 3 or 4 days a week at first, but that got me motivated enough to get a job. So I ended up getting a job at Buffalo Wild Wings. And let me say that I didn't just like go from not working to work and like things were normal. I had some very bad anxiety and a very hard time in social situations. I was very socially awkward. I would always look down at the ground. I couldn't look people in the eye. I couldn't hold conversations. My brain was just like fried all the time, you know, thinking about the worst possible things that could happen in any type of situation. But what I did to cope with that is I fabricated my life to the people that I worked with, because at the time I hadn't foregone my Tesla to the bank yet, and I was driving that to work, and people would see me pull up in it. They'd be like, why are you working, dude? So what I would tell them is, I just have this job so I can socialize. I'm a social creature, and not talking to people is hard for me, you know? But I worked there for about 6 months here in town, and I eventually realized this just doesn't, like, I just don't feel good. I have a bad feeling in my stomach, in my gut. I just am not happy with myself and the way that I'm conducting myself, and I wanted a fresh start. I wanted to be honest with people moving forward, and I am so glad that I made that decision, because it is freeing. People can't hold things over your head if you've already held them over your own head. If you are accountable for your actions and for your mistakes and the things that you've done wrong, it is not going to hurt you when people point them out to you. You know, I think that criticism only really hurts if you haven't accepted and realized it yourself. So I decided to do that, and I quit that job and I got a fresh start. My first job after that was as a personal trainer at a gym here in town. I was making $18 for every hour that I was training clients, which is fine. It's okay money, but for the bills that I had, it wasn't spectacular. But from that day on is really when I started to grow as a person, because I owned up to my actions to the people around me. And it wasn't easy. You know, I certainly, for that whole 6 months I was there, I was still very socially awkward. I still couldn't hold conversations. I couldn't look people in the eye. I had anxiety all the time. But it was the start of my healing process. Eventually I realized that's not going to be enough money for me to do what I need to do. So I quit that job and I got a different serving job. And that is where I have been at now for the last year and a quarter or so. And the same thing goes there. You know, every single person that works with me at that place knows that I have debt of $1 million. They know that I was once rich and that I blew it all. They know that I have a YouTube channel that's got over 300,000 subscribers and a Twitter with over 200K. And they just know that I was a dingus and I was a degenerate and that I was a loser. And that I got myself where I am today because of my own choices and my own actions, you know. So over that year and a quarter, I slowly noticed myself starting to improve and grow and change. I can now look people in the eye again. I can hold good conversations. I actually have a good small circle of friends in real life, not just internet friends, you know, which is sick because that's the first time I've really had that since college. You know, I had my assistant back when I did YouTube. He was a good friend of mine and still is today. But not a lot of people in my life were just like around that I hung out with and did stuff that supported me IRL, so to speak. So that's been really nice for sure. But that was a very slow and arduous, if that's even a word, process that required me being humbled. And I wanted to explain all of this because what YouTube taught me, you know, that lesson, the lesson in all of this is two big things for me. Number one is that I'd never been humbled like that in my entire life. I really did think of myself as invincible, as a god, so to speak, which maybe sounds crazy to you, but when you go from being a nobody to a somebody overnight like that, it fundamentally changes your psychology. And I thought of myself as pretty invincible. You know, I didn't really think that I could do wrong, so to speak, but I could, and I did, and I fucked my life up pretty rough, man. But the second lesson that I learned over the last couple of years The second lesson I learned over the last couple of years is, I'm trying to think of how to say it. I learned how to be happy with myself. I learned that what matters most is being able to look yourself in the mirror at the end of every single day and say, no matter the outcome, I know that I did the right thing and I did what I could do. And there's real value in that. And I don't think I've been able to say that for most of my life. For most of my life, I've been motivated by being viewed in a positive light by others. You know, all of my successes from high school and college and YouTube was motivated by pleasing other people, by being viewed in a positive light by other people. I never wanted to do it for myself, you know. And now all I want for myself is to look myself in the eye and say, you're doing good things, to have a family someday, to have kids, to be a provider, to be a rock, to be a supporter for those future people and for my family that's presently here today. And in order to do that, I've got a lot of work to do, man. But I had to first accept and learn that lesson. I obviously don't gamble anymore either. I haven't been to a casino in years. That would obviously be a silly thing to do. And I have to take a much drastically different approach to the market. You know, I'm not I think Madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So I'm certainly going to be approaching the market and have been approaching the market in a much different way, a much slower way, a much safer way, a much less risky way. But I guess that sort of brings me up to present day, which is I'm in a lot of debt and I have a lot of work to do to get myself into a better situation. And in order to do that, I think I need to come back to YouTube. But before I get into that, I first need to say one thing, because if I'm going to talk about, you know, being open and transparent and honest with everybody and taking accountability for the mistakes I made in my life, there's one that you guys need to know, which is that I was paid to talk about a stock and did not disclose that I was paid to talk about it. It happened one time, singular time. It happened never again after that. But that stock was ticker ZKIN. I was never paid to talk about AMC in a positive light or a negative light. I've never been paid to talk about any other stock in a positive light or a negative light, but I was paid to talk about that stock and did not disclose it. If you're on Twitter and you follow me, I've already talked about this and admitted to it. But the Plain Bagel was conducting an investigation on that company, and he reached out to me and said, were you paid to talk about this stock, and did not disclose to talk about it? And I admitted to him that I had. And that screenshot's floating around on the internet, and some people have insinuated things about that, but that is just the honest to God truth. And that was obviously the wrong thing to do. My rationale at the time was I wasn't very well off. I hadn't really hit it big on YouTube yet. I got reached out to by some Korean or Asian lady on Instagram saying, hey, I'm a representative of ZKIN. We want to pay you a couple $1,000s. I think it was like $3,000 or $4,000 to talk about the company. And at the time, crypto mining was doing very well. Mara, Riot, Zkin were all hitting it pretty big. So I thought, well, I'm already thinking about taking a trade in this, and they want to offer me some money, so why not? But I should have disclosed that I was paid to talk about it. I didn't disclose it because what I cared about the most at the time was being viewed in a positive light by my audience. That doesn't make it right. It's certainly not the right thing to do. That was the wrong thing to do. But that is the rationale and the reason as to why I did it. I would have been rightfully bashed for it. I would have deserved that, and I should have been bashed for it. And I was caught actually when I got paid to talk about that stock and didn't disclose it, because Tom Nash was offered the same thing, and he publicly shared that email with his audience, and I had a video up still talking about it, and I got roasted. I just made up some bullshit excuses, coincidence, and blah, blah, blah about the company. But the truth is, it wasn't coincidence. It did happen. I was paid to talk about that stock and did not disclose that I was paid to talk about it. And that was the wrong thing to do. I learned from it. It was the only time it ever happened. I haven't been that man for a long time, but that version of me has existed. And I want to also say that I'm not trying to convince you to trust me. I'm not trying to convince you to like me. I don't expect the full support of every single person that knows this about me. I just want to take accountability for my actions because that's the right thing to do. So I'll leave it at that. The last thing that I want to talk about, I'm coming back to YouTube, and I have two main goals. The first and most important to me is getting out of debt. I put myself into a rough spot with all my decision making over the last couple of years, and in order to get out of it, I need a bigger shovel. Now, I don't plan on just coming back to YouTube and making bullshit. You know, I'd like to provide value for you guys, which brings me into point number two. Point number two is I want to share my story because I don't think I'm the only person who's probably in these shoes. Like I said earlier in this video, I think I said it, 70% of people that win the lottery end up losing all the money. And I imagine that there are a lot of people out there who metaphorically won the lottery and lost all the money. And if you felt, or I still feel the way that I felt, I don't want anybody to have to experience that. And I want to share my story and journey getting out of debt and fixing my life. Because there's really two ways that I can look at my life moving forward, and that you can look at your life moving forward if you're in a similar shoe, is either, this path, which is my life is fucked and I'm just going to live in misery, or path two, which is my life sucks. I got myself here. I need to accept that that was a version of me, learn from it, and try to move forward and grow and fix shit. And you might never fix shit, but isn't it better to think, I think Matthew McConaughey says this, it's better to believe that everything's going to be all right than to think that everything isn't, even if things aren't all right. I'd rather believe in myself enough to think that it's possible to fix shit, so I'm going to try. And that's where I'm at. And I want to share that journey with you. I'm not a guru. I'm not a genius. This is going to be a learning process for me. But I want to do things a much different way. I want to take a real approach to finance, more so than trading. I want to talk about my journey in finance, managing my finances, getting out of debt, saving money, buying stocks long term, wheeling the stock that I own, selling calls and puts against it, trading occasionally, taking trades, but certainly in a much less risk adverse way and with a much smarter approach. Not putting money to the market that I can't afford to lose, paying my taxes, paying my mortgage off. I want to share it all with you. So that's where I'm at. I plan on eventually getting back into live streaming. I plan on making videos regularly again. I plan on sharing my journey. And if you want to be a part of that, I would be honored to have you. And if not, I understand. There's good reason to support my comeback, I think, but there's also good reason not to. I made some poor choices, and there's consequences to that, and I accept that. It is what it is. I guess my last piece that I'm going to say, and then I'm going to get out of here, is Colin Gladman is a mentor to me. And one thing that he really sort of has ingrained in my brain and many others that follow him is to build a house, you got to stack a couple bricks at a time. It doesn't happen overnight. I want to make a very small, slow approach to building this house. And in order to do that, you just got to lay a brick, lay a brick at a time. And that's my plan. And you can do that too if you're in a similar situation. So I guess that's what I got. I got to get my PC fixed. I got to replace my motherboard. But once that's fixed, I'm going to be back. And I'll be seeing y'all. Take it easy.